The median white household's wealth, their savings, assets minus their debts, is $171,000. The median black household's is $17,600. And that gap is still growing and growing. Why?
In the United States, the racial wealth gap is not just the consequence of economic disparities. It's the product of deliberate policies and systemic injustices that have perpetuated inequality for generations. One such policy was redlining, a practice that systematically denied home loans for people of color, particularly Black Americans, based on their neighborhood's racial composition. Following the Great Depression, the federal government established the Federal Housing Authority, which, according to the book The Color of Wealth, underwrote an estimated $120 billion worth of home loans for white families between 1934 and 1962, while explicitly excluding families of color. Most American families hold most of their wealth in the form of home equity. These policies built the white middle class while shutting Black communities out of one of the most critical wealth development opportunities, homeownership.
Found the model house, and we walked in and we looked around, and of course, in the eyes of a young man who was raised in the ghetto, so to speak, it was an interesting experience, interesting lifestyle, seeing all the new modern conveniences. Very fascinating. Went up to the salesman, we're interested in your home, we're interested in buying one, and what is the procedure? Is there an application to be filled out? So forth. So he looked at me, looked around, and he said to me, he says, listen, it's not me, but the owners of this development have not as yet decided to sell these homes to Negroes.
Have you ever wondered why when you drive through a certain community, you may see a health clinic instead of a hospital, or a corner store instead of a grocery store, a check cashing place instead of a bank? This discriminatory lending practice not only denied people of color the opportunity to build wealth through homeownership, but also perpetuated segregated communities and limited access to quality education and other critical resources in the United States. Most public schools are funded by property taxes. Redlining policy goes on to shape the funding of schools for generations to come. A study conducted by the National Community Reinvestment Coalition estimated that the cumulative loss in home equity due to redlining and other discriminatory lending practices amounted to trillions of dollars of wealth lost in Black families across the United States. Today, the legacy of redlining continues through gentrification, the modern-day phenomenon that displaces communities of color from their neighborhoods, denying them the chance to accumulate wealth. A 2018 study by the Brookings Institute found that homes in Black neighborhoods are undervalued by an average of $48,000, amounting to $156 billion in cumulative losses for Black homeowners. Most schools in the United States don't teach about redlining practices and how they shape the economic disparities in this country. Even fewer connect redlining policies, which shut Black families out of homeownership for generations, to gentrification, which now is pushing Black families out of their homes and communities. To bridge the racial wealth gap, we must acknowledge this economic vice grip and confront the historic and systemic barriers that have perpetuated inequality by advocating for fair housing policies, equitable lending practices, and community reinvestment. We can work towards a future where everyone has the opportunity to build wealth and thrive. Remember, the theme of this series is that understanding Black history is critical to understanding our freedoms and understanding a pathway for a Black future.